Dean Christy Bell, Assistant Dean Christy Bell Garcia, Assistant Dean Tracy Ann Williams. Thank you all for joining us today. Where are we? I want to make sure I have you in my view. Okay, got you. Thank you. Okay.
You think we're going to hide from you now?
I know, right here. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to jump right in. The first question, how do you define student success? Christy Bell.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was so there's this thing that Dean Williams and I always do when we're on panels together, where I like usually throw the question back at her instead of taking it. but I'm happy to get started. Thank you all for joining us, and it really is a pleasure, but mostly an honor just to be able to share space to talk about how do we support students and how do we conceptualize this together. So interestingly enough, my job title now says student success. So I like to define it by the values and principles by which I operate in my work with students. And I think that when we talk about student success, we're talking about centering people, right? And centering students as human beings with diverse needs, who come from diverse backgrounds, who are complex, and for which we have a responsibility to be prepared for. So one of the things that I always find a bit disturbing, but sometimes humorous, is when people say, these students are not prepared for blah, blah, blah. And my response is always, well, it is our responsibility to be prepared to support students however they come to us, right? That is a responsibility that we have when we invite students into our institution and to be a part of our community, right? So we make a commitment to them and to their families that we will support them fully and wholly and holistically. And so I think that as we conceptualize student success and we talk about barriers and whatnot, we're also talking about real people who have names and lived experiences, and that come to us with gifts, with challenges that they're experiencing and facing, and that as a community, there's enough of us to be able to serve them. And I think that when we operate from that kind of perspective, that we are in service of students and that we are centering students and their lives, all of a sudden there's a huge shift in terms of how the community can take care and make sure that no harm is caused to students, right? Because we care for them fully and wholly. So
thank you.
Looking at an environment that's welcoming, in that we from every end of the university are making certain that all of our constituents are aware of what our students need. So to make certain that we're all on board with being available to students and making certain that all the services that we provide entail their complete, as Christy Bell said, holistic perspective of looking at the student and what they need, not just, oh, we've accepted them, now they're here and they're on their own, but making certain that we are able to walk with them in this journey of being Fordham members and community members within all of those frameworks.
And Tracy Ann, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just add something very briefly. I'm going to quote Christy Bell, like something that she said in other spaces to me that has really stayed with me in my work. And it is that she is in service to the students. And I think that is a very important position to take, because I think when some colleagues hear that, they think that means that we have to give in to students, that the students aren't empowered, that the students need to read the emails that are sent out the way they are sent out, and they have to do all the things that the emails say and process them exactly how we think they should process them, as opposed to meeting the students where they are. There are a lot of emails that go out. They're not coordinated, and some of them are contradictory. And why do we assume that emails are the best form of communication for our students? So it means seeing them as they are, in all of their parts. We get tripped up a lot in our cura personalis because we just say it a lot, but I think that it's confusing and muddled as to what that means. So for me, it means that I see students for who they are, but I see all of their different parts, and I invite them to bring their different parts into their conversations with me. It means that I may hear from a faculty member, the student isn't attending. That's all I hear, and then I might start investigating that. And it's not just that the student isn't attending. I might notice on degree works, the degree works that a lot of people look at, that there's a past due balance. So I ask about that. The student tells me that they've been having a little anxiety, or they're nervous about what's been going on. I ask about that. I don't purport to be a therapist of any kind, although a student I was talking to last night told me that I needed to go back and get a degree in counseling. And I said, okay, I'll do that as my side hustle. But it's just about, I think students are really, really aware when somebody takes the time to see them and not judge them, and to look at those different parts and to foreground and highlight different parts at different times and assist them without judgment.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to expand this question out just a little bit more. As far as when we're thinking about our students of color, what does this structure look like in the way of support and need for students of color at a predominantly white institution like Fordham in order for them to thrive? You speak about the whole person, and it's not just and meeting them where they are. Can you expand a little bit on that?
I think without question, it's taking out that feeling of otherness. You don't want to be the individual that's excluded from the main group. You want to be a part of the group. And I think the idea of coming into an environment where you are limited in numbers is intimidating in and of itself. So making certain that all of the areas of the institution are aware of the fact that we are welcoming students, and in that welcoming, making certain that students, faculty, administrators, staff are aware of what students will need, and not to make them feel ostracized in the environment. Because I think that's the biggest takeaway from a lot of this as to why we can't retain students of color or even attract students of color, is because they come into the campus environment feeling that they're other than the individuals that are there, the majority culture.
Thank you. Christy Bell or Tracy Ann, would you like to expand from your experiences? Specifically for our students of color. I saw what happened.
We're looking at each other as what's happening. And she told me, go for it. I think that, students, they're at a particular time in their lives, like when they're coming to college in some ways to determine who they're going to be, and to figure out if the person that they were, for the last several years, is the person that they're going to be. And I think that it's very difficult to navigate a space that they think and they feel is hostile toward their very existence. It's hard to be in conversations with students who report that they're told that a particular major isn't for them, that it's not for people like them, or maybe they should do something else, or maybe this is just not the right place for you. That it can be said in a way that's innocent, perhaps, to the person saying it, but that can be very detrimental to someone. And I think that what students are looking for is, again, someone who will see them. And if they come to you and say, I'm struggling in this particular course, that we don't tell them that, this whole college thing it's a failed experiment, that maybe you need some tutoring resources. Maybe it's because the faculty member teaches in a style that is not in alignment with how the student learns. And that can be, that's just a bucket for a number of different issues, you know. But it doesn't mean that the student is failing out of this whole thing. Also, when I have those conversations with students, I ask them about the kinds of things that they like, you know, like I want to find out who they are. And like, what are the kinds of courses that you have like? Tell me about your other courses. And in that course of the conversation, sometimes we're able to identify an area that they might want to explore a little bit more that they hadn't considered would be something that they might be able to pursue. I think that it's just a very tricky thing for students who are feeling that that the environment is not open and welcoming to them. It's not just because of the numbers, but because of the attitude, perhaps. And the attitude doesn't necessarily have to come from individuals different from them. It is also the case that there are individuals who might be closer to those students' identities who are also hostile toward the students. Like why, like again, why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they doing that? As opposed to why are our systems geared to making students not succeed? Why are those students not doing well? But how are our systems, our interlocking systems, causing students to fall by the wayside? Because you know the measure of our success isn't the students who are always excelling and succeeding. It's all of them have the ability to succeed if we put the infrastructure in place that will allow them to be successful at Fordham.
Thank you, Tracy.
I was going to add, I think it challenges our assumptions about what it means to support students of color or BIPOC students, as though like all BIPOC students are the same, right? And often there's this idea where like so we're having this panel, we're going to talk about how do we support students of color. Like, what does that really mean? Because the experience of students of color who come to our campus is extremely varied. But often we operate from a place of our own assumptions about who people of color are, right? So it's like, oh, so they're BIPOC students, so they must come from this community, right? They must know these things, they must understand. And when we operate from that place, we stop seeing people, right? Like we stop seeing the student because we've already created a narrative for ourselves about who these students are. And that is truly, I think, where the danger happens, right? So the harm causes the moment I walk into this campus and you see the, you know, how dark I am and you choose what my lived experience is, which is not true and is not accurate. And so, you know, in my many years of supporting students of color, and so, you know, to folks who may not know me well, my entire career has been dedicated to supporting students of color, right? Like I came into this work, working for an opportunity program, supporting BIPOC students, and now I'm in a more college-wide position. But the experience was hearing the harm that was caused at an institution to students of color when professors subtly said things that they didn't even realize was causing harm to students, right? And then the students felt that they were crazy. And then they were like, wait, did that just happen to me? And you'd have to be like, it did happen to you and it was wrong. And now we need to figure out how to work through this, right? And so, I mean, we can go into detail about what that looks like and what that feels like, but it looks like students coming to our institution who believe that they can be successful and they have been rock stars. And our institution, little by little, making them feel like they are no longer that and that they have to choose to be something else to fit into the academy, right? That the academy has decided what is enough, what is appropriate, right? And so, you know, we can talk about code switching, but the question is like, why can't students just come fully as they are? So I was on a panel with a student last week, an admissions panel, and I adore this student. I think she's incredible. And she literally said she had to coach herself with like, who I am is good enough, just the way I am, and y'all need to suck it up. right? Like this is how she like taught herself to come to class, to be her full human self, that she didn't have to shift, she didn't have to switch, she could show up whole, and no one could take that from her, right? Like to hear her say that to prospective students who are asking if a place like us is the right place to come really is deep, right? Like I have to sit with that, but now I am responsible for that information, right? Like she shared that, and I'm like, what do we do to undo a structure that dehumanizes students the way that it does? Because
Yes.
then we have to talk about, right, like how white supremacy and the way that the academy is built does this by design. Like this is what it's supposed to do. It
Right.
does exactly what it's supposed to do. Our invitation then is like, how do we do it differently? And how do we undo that together, right?
Yes.
From the very subtle things that we do, right? From the not intentional. I didn't mean to do that, right?
Mhm.
Because the reality is it was still done. And now
Right.
the impact is there. And I have students who are like, this place killed me. And I want nothing to do with this place. Like I want my degree and I want to be done, but I don't want to be here. And I don't really want to do anything else with it, right? So
Mhm.
I think when we start
Yeah.
talking about what it means to serve students and students of color, I think it's like, can you see them? Do you see them exactly for who they are?
Right.
And let them tell you their story. Like let them tell you their story without making assumptions about what resources they have or don't have, or what resources they need or don't need. Like they will tell you. They're often very eager,
Right.
as
Right.
Tracy Ann said, to share their stories. Like very eager, if we just give them the space to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, Jennifer, did you want to add something before I got into the next question?
No, I'm good with what
Okay.
you said.
I think that this is a great segue now to the second question. How do our structures and systems create barriers to access and success? There are barriers that exist, and who benefits, who doesn't benefit, who are disadvantaged and benefit by these structures. And if we could address that, that would be great.
I'll give a simple example, something that we're going through right now in terms of one area of the university. So we're going through the annual room selection process. And so part of that process is you have to put in a deposit, $200 in order to reserve your space for the next academic year. $200 to some may be a nominal amount. Oh, what's the problem? Put your $200 down. For some students, that's a huge challenge.
Right.
So the systems or barriers that will deflect from that student being able to participate is the fact that I don't have $200 to be a part of the group. So one of the ways that you can mitigate those situations is to make allowances for students, or either to pay on a payment plan or something of that nature, but not to put them in a position where they have to be amongst peers and not be able to join a group, because in order to be a part of the process, they have to put in a deposit. I think it's looking at the various protocols, steps, procedures, things of that nature that we have in order to make allowances and availabilities, not allowances, but availabilities to students who are in need of that. And again, speaking to the fact that no, I can't make an assumption that because a student is BIPOC, student of color, that they will need those services, but to make certain that I have that available for anyone that comes forward. I think it's the flexibility, and sometimes we are so inflexible in terms of what we do, we end up embarrassing a student to the extent that they don't even want to participate, and they will figure out some other way to do it or not do it at all, not even be a part of the process.
That is true. That is true. Um,
I think making things explicit, right? Like this is the barriers are when things are not explicit, right? And then students have, we're like, but students should advocate for themselves, right? And so I've shared this example student, you're like, they should really be advocating for themselves. And the student is saying, but asking for help makes me feel like I'm not good enough, smart enough, talented enough, etc. Because I've never really had to ask for help. Like the way that I've been socialized is, right, like you just figure it out. And me asking a professor to give me extra time, right, or to allow me to submit the assignment later, will make me hyper visible. I already feel hyper visible, right, in the space. Will make me feel like I'm a failure. I already feel like a failure, right? And so sometimes when, there is, like the example would be professor says, I don't accept late work. But if John emails you and asks you if they could submit late work, the professor, and it gives you their reason, right? Like a justifiable reason, professor is likely to accept it. But the syllabus said that you don't accept late work. So this student did not know that they could navigate this differently, right? A student will say, well, I didn't know I could go to the dean and ask for a substitution. I did not know that I could go to so-and-so. I did not know I could go to financial aid and appeal. I did not know that I could ask for fill in the blank, right? So all of a sudden, if every single thing becomes, I did not know that I could ask for these things, then who's got the problem? We do, right? As an institution, because we're making it so that it's a maze to navigate, right? And that only if you're in the know, and only if you have the social capital to navigate this very complicated structure will you be able to thrive in it, right? Because you need to know what you don't know to know how to ask for those things, right? So the more we sit with students and engage in these conversations, and we're providing support, and Tracy Ann can, we spend all day talking to like all day and nights, right? Talking to students. You're like, they didn't know they could ask for that. Like they had no clue, right? Professor, how do I say that? They don't even know how to say that thing, right? So how do we begin to create the structures and the preparation, right, for navigating this? But how do we take away some of the like coded language? Like, just like if you take late work, like just say that. Like say, I will take late work as long as there's a excused absence from your dean. Blank, the student knows they can do that. I will take, if you have an extenuating circumstance, please let me know and we can speak about this. And then the student knows that they can do that. If you don't have the book, put it in your syllabus. Let me know that you can't access the book. Let's talk offline, right? And then let's figure out a plan for getting the student the book. Oftentimes students go weeks in a semester with no books because they don't know who to go to say, I don't have the book. Or the library can help, the professor might have an extra copy. And students don't always know, right? Like who to go to get the things that they need. And so those are real structural issues, right? Just in the way that we're designing the experience for the students.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd also add that in my experience, sometimes the students are afraid. This cuts across all ethnic, racial, gender lines. Like they often ask me, will you tell my professor? Will you tell my class dean that we've talked? And I'm like, no. Like, I mean, because I operate on a need to know basis, right? But also they don't want people to know that it's not all what the mask is portraying, because, everybody's got to be having the same experience. Everybody's the same at Fordham and all that stuff. So they don't want folks to know. And that's not particular to students of color. That's all the students who I talk to. They're very nervous. Some of what I do is helping them speak to professors because they feel, given what Christy Bell has said, like, the syllabus says, I will accept nothing. Do not bother me. Leave me be. Like, so they're like, well, I can't. And I'm like, yeah, you can. And we draft the email together, there are folks joining us today that have received some of the products of my co-writing, my ghostwriting skills. I tell them you need to write a 4 to 5 sentence email. Here's what it can sound like. Dear Professor Wonderful, I hope you're well. And we go from there. I tell them you don't need to provide a doctor's note. I don't want to see the doctor's note because I don't need it. If you tell me that you have had a medical issue, I believe you, unless there's something that arises that makes me question you. I mean, to me, that's on you. If you want to lie to me, like that has nothing to do with me. So if they say to me that they're experiencing housing insecurity, I believe them. And I did that as well as a faculty member. My syllabi said, we're specific, and like I had a lovely reputation for being a tough professor. But my syllabus didn't say I will not accept anything late. Like it said something like, if special problems arise, please contact me. Like, and that's the catch-all for late assignments, absences, all of it. And, you know, there was obviously a school attendance policy at the institution where I used to work, and I would state it on my syllabus. But, you know, there's sometimes things that happen that, you know, and I don't know that it benefits us to be punitive to students when they're already nervous about being at a university and all that it means to them. And for some of the students not wanting to go home because they have different identities here than they do at home. They don't want to go back, or they shed an identity on the train, which has been very difficult for our students in this pandemic, having to not be able to fully embody who they are becoming. So it behooves us to support them in the best ways that we can, so that we can help them become who they want to become and be proud of who they are, as opposed to harming them in some way that makes them feel like that we didn't care for them, that we didn't love them during this time that they're with us.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tracy Ann. Yeah. I'm going to move on to this next question. I think is incredibly valuable. What does it look like when we do not think of students of color as exceptional or deficient? Go ahead, Christy Bell. You know.
Yeah, sure. I think this is a really interesting question, right? Oftentimes, students of color and their experiences are very much exceptionalized, right? Like they made it, they have arrived, like they've done the thing, right? That comes with a lot of pressure, but it also gives us permission to not have to address like the systems that have made it difficult for students, right? Or the things that have been difficult for them, right? Because just because they are resilient, right? And they are here, doesn't mean that there have not been obstacles or that the experience is still not difficult, right? Because often I think there might be this idea, right? Supporting students is also they can be their full self. And like not just like survive the institution, because this is not like, you know, our students of color are not like leaving us at a greater rate. They're not, you know, their grades are not so much work. Like it's not that narrative, but like, are they thriving? Like, do we often ask ourselves, like, are students of color thriving at the institution? And like, how would we define that, right? Are like, do they know about all the opportunities that are available, right? Like, are y'all watching out for them and making sure that you have space for them, right? You make space for them, that you support them to discern their gifts, to arrive at their next destination, whatever that looks like, right? Like when I mean, I'm gonna shout out Lindsay Hoyt because we've worked together, support students of color in your research lab, and then give them your time to discern who they want to be and encourage them, right? Like even when they felt that the institution maybe hasn't done that for them, right? Like, and say like, I got your back. And I quote, like, Dr. Hoyt has my back. So if I don't know something, they're not ashamed to ask her because she's got their back, right? Like, what does that look like at an institution where that's the culture, right? Like students feel like my advisor, my faculty member, these people, they got me. And if I don't know something, I can come to them and there's no shame because there's not an expectation that I am like so exceptional that I can't need support, right? Like I can need support. I can sometimes be having a really difficult day and a difficult time because like some Black boy just got shot. Like, so I'm tired and I like want to come and know that it's safe for me to grieve, right? Like our institution doesn't always give us permission to do that. Right. And not everybody names that or holds space for that. Like, and things are happening every day. Like, you don't know what happened as I walked in my skin across campus and public safety stopped me. Yeah. I've gotten stopped as an administrator, woman of color coming onto campus. That's not students only. So imagine that you getting triggered at the gate before they got to you. You were on the train, as our Asian students shared with us very publicly, and what that felt like before I arrived to campus, right? Like, we are talking about what are their just like lived experiences by walking in their skin and their communities. Like it happened with the pandemic, where some people were gifted the opportunity to not know anyone that died. There were people who had people dying every week that they knew, right? And that there was an overrepresentation in certain communities, right? And so all of a sudden, BIPOC students, commuter students were getting hit by this in a way that other people, you know, who were able to get away and get their mail sent to wherever they went, didn't have to experience. That was a reality of the lived experience of students. And people still expect them to show up in a certain way, right? So I think it really does bring us to a place where, like, if we often are exceptionalizing, or if we're often talking about students as disadvantaged, then we never really see them. We don't, right? Because we already, again, and it's a similar point, right, are making a story for these students, but we also don't want to acknowledge the systems that are impacting, creating, and forcing these things to happen, right? Because then we also have to be responsible, right? And take responsibility for our parts in it, right? Like, how are we complicit with it? How do we maintain the structure? Because if we're not working to undo it, then we're intentionally working to maintain it. Like, and that's a really hard conversation when you realize that if I don't do anything differently, then I'm a part of the problem. But then I have to be like, oh, but then I'm one of those people, right? Like, you know, who are those people? Tracy, I'm going to give you your in, right? When we're like the good people, you know, these are good people. Like, you know, people at Fordham, they really care. But we help to construct the system often and maintain it just the way that it is.
Right. Thank you so much, Christy.
Set me up there, because she knows it's one of my triggers. Like, I have heard from multiple colleagues about other colleagues that they are good people. In the just over a year that I've been at Fordham, and people say to me, Tracy Ann, so-and-so, they're really good. Like, you know, just, you know, and I'm like, no, like, no, I don't know what you mean. Like, why are you telling me about this person? Because our meeting is about something else entirely. Why are you telling me about this person? And that happened to me and continues to happen to me in ways that I think are very curious. I think that I'm supposed to take that and run with it, so that if any information comes up about that particular person, that I don't have a reaction, or maybe I don't seek to address the situation. But I don't think I was hired to be silent, and I certainly don't. It would destroy me internally, like, to hear about some of the things that I've heard about and not try to assist students. I have been in meetings where I've heard about first generation students who are not all Black, Indigenous, people of color. They come in all races and sizes and classes and so on. First generation students, you know, don't try hard enough, or we need to help our Black students, like, know the value of an education. These are things that are being said by our colleagues. And quite frankly, if other folks aren't as bothered by it as I am, then I'm like Christabel, like, I guess that means that's okay here. Like, that's what people really feel. But I get triggered by those things, and then she has to deal with me because I'm like, wait, is this, you know, like, what do we do with this? How do we address this? How does this show up? How does it look when I go in to speak to a faculty member? I'm talking about a student, and I try to explain what's happening in a class, and they tell me, you know, but that's just how it is, you know, and the person kind of looks like me, or I think they are like me, and I'm not getting anywhere, you know. Like, how are we really serving the students when we think that they're showing up with deficiencies that we need to fix, and like fix it until we like grind something out of them? That is not what this education is supposed to be about. This education, as I've said to many students, is priceless, and it affords the opportunity to do many different things, but you cannot feel like you are being ground down in the process. So what can we do to elevate our students so that they feel like, again, I've said it already, with their unique talents are being prized, that it's, as Christy Bell knows, because we're in the midst of launching a first generation network. And some of what we said to the students was like, we want them to feel like being first generation is something to trumpet all over, that it's not something that they should hide, because quite a number of them have felt badly. I wouldn't say quite a number, it seems like that's the common theme, that they felt badly about being here, that hearing that, like, you know, so-and-so's mom like marched into the financial aid office and got them more money, or so-and-so's mom did this, or, you know, or that dad knew this person, and they're ashamed to bring their family on campus because they don't know if their families will be accepted, or there might be a language barrier, and they don't know if there'll be anybody who will be willing to interact with their family, or just, I mean, just things that are so painful to hear, and to hear them at this place, I think is, I wouldn't say it's troubling. I would say it's an invitation for us to push a little bit harder, and if the problem is here, turn it this way so that we can see it from a different angle and work differently to make the experience more effective and productive for all of our students.
Yes. Thank you, Tracy Ann. Thank you. Jennifer, did you want to add anything to that?
Just a dovetail of it's adding or providing more than just the lip service of, we're a Jesuit institution. I think we fall on that sword too often, and we don't put it into practice in terms of what actualizes with our students. So it's great to say, oh, we take care of the whole student, and that's what we advertise, quote unquote, to parents, to students, to constituents alike. But when you get into the fabric of who we really are we really doing that? And part of the conversation that, Christy Bell and Tracy Ann are having with students speak to the fact that we aren't doing that. It speaks to the fact that we have to dwell deeper than what we are doing currently in terms of our encounters with students. I think without question, even talking about some of the narratives that I've received from student staff, other student leaders that I've spoken to in terms of their experiences in the classroom, sometimes they are put into a situation where they're speaking for everyone, quote unquote, in their group. I don't want to speak for everyone. I can't speak for everyone. I can tell you about my particular experiences, and that's inundating to students when they come up against those types of conversations and are being pointed out in conversations that, oh, well, I'm sure you understand this because you're from, and I'll use my example, from Newark. Well, no, I don't have that experience because I went to private school all my life. So, making that you
Right.
went X because of the area that you're from is something that causes students to shut down, because now, you've put me in a box already and you haven't taken the time to really understand who I am as an individual so that we can have a conversation about, what that means in the context of, the conversation, the topic, or whatever it is that we're discussing.
Very good point. Thank you so much, Jennifer. It is really about being seen, and how students are not seen until you put together there is a something in common, or they represent something that you've been holding tight to as a belief in a system. I thank you so much for that.
Can I add just one more thing?
Sure.
It made me think of a conversation I had last night with a student, and I did say last night because sometimes, I mean, you can have office hours, but that doesn't always work. Like with student schedules, they've got a lot of stuff going on. And the conversation on its surface was about a balance and a financial hold. And so we did address that. Like, there were funds given, payments need to be made. There was a form that needed to be filled out. There was still another form that has to be filled out and all that stuff. However, we also talked about a recent breakup, heartbreak, talked about what was going to be cooked, which was chicken and arroz con habichuela. We talked about hair that's falling out and what was in that hair. And I gave suggestions about what might be used and how perhaps the hair might need to be done in order to promote hair growth, let's say. We talked about home, we talked about family. This was not an all-night conversation. It sounds like it. It sounds like a conversation that you could have over a lifetime. But, you know, what I'm getting at is that in that conversation, that was about a bill and registration and a balance and a form that needs to be filled out and yet another form that has to be filled out and funds that need to be really, I mean, there's a person there that is also feeling kind of funny that there's a balance right now too. And like, what are the other things that are happening in that person's life that are going on? The conversation flowed rather naturally is what I would say, like from topic to topic. The end result, I think, I mean, in the end, like, I think we must have said goodbye like 5 or 6 times, you know, because there was something else, like, and this, and then there was this, and there was this, and there was this. But at the end of the conversation, I will say that the student was smiling. The conversation didn't start that way. And also took the time to say, hey, like, you know, I have this thing coming up, as students sometimes do. Like, they don't want you to know that sometimes it, like, you know, it really matters. But I have this thing coming up. It's not a big deal. I you know, it's nothing really important. But, you know, if you're available, like, is it something like you might consider doing? If I told you the date, and I wrote down the date, and I wrote down the time, and I said, send me an email. I'll be there. You know, and I just say that as an example of how it can look sometimes if it's not just about the thing. We're all busy, like, you know, and stretched. And any student that talks to me knows that at any minute a 6-year-old might come in and need something that's very acute, or there's a dog that has eaten something of the 6-year-olds. But still, you can make them feel like they matter, you know, that it's still important.
Yes, that's a great point right there. We have 15 minutes left. I want to allow for Q&A, but I was hoping to get some final thoughts from our panelists around how might faculty work with you, with students, to create this environment. You know, you have any suggestions? We talked about office hours a little bit. Answering emails was something else, and really seeing the student. What can faculty begin to consider that will improve the experience for the student success and retention? Is there anything?
I for me, it's the outreach and reaching out to folks like Tracy Ann, like Christy Bell, myself, the deans, to make us aware sometimes of things that are happening with students. We have a lot of touch points, I think, at the university,
Right.
as it relates to some students who are involved in student leadership roles, some students that are student employees, things of that nature. But then there are also gaps in those touch points, in that if a student is a commuter just coming to campus for class, you know, they have other activities that they are responsible for, family matters, work, you name it. There are so many other responsibilities that they may have outside of their roles as students at Fordham. You are seeing them in the classroom. Potentially there may be something that's a disconnect that you notice over time. Being able to outreach to that student sooner rather than later, I think, makes a difference in whether or not they are able to complete the semester, get through midterms, whatever the quote unquote thing is that they need to do. Potentially being able to reach those students, contact them, see if there are supports that they need based on some of the observations or conversations that you're having with them, may be helpful in terms of some of the other supports that we can put in place for those students sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Any other thoughts, Christy Bell?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think my big one is like humanizing and rehumanizing and just us doing the work of like being people with people. I think that if we're talking about the experience of students of color, like we often have to recognize the ways in which this structure dehumanizes folks. And so like we are invited to humanize, right? And to just be with people. I think don't make it hard. Like don't make it complicated. Like make it simple. Meet students where they are, right? They like would love to come and talk to professors. They like don't often know like what this whole thing entails. So like don't make it difficult to like for them to talk to like you, right? Like invite them, right? Like if they don't come, then invite them, right? Meet them where they are, because often they have so much they wish to share, but they're often unsure of like how they are going to navigate this really complicated system. And then thirdly, I would say like be familiarized with the resources, and if you don't know, like reach out, right? Like if you don't know, if you're not sure, please reach out to me. Please reach out to Tracy Ann. As Jennifer said, reach out to the deans and student affairs. If you're not sure, could start with us. I can be your point person at FCRH. Like if you're not sure, reach out, and we can redirect in the right direction. And until we get better at making it easy to find the information. So we'll commit to making the information more accessible, and that I think it's a big project that we have ahead of us. But in the meantime, just reach out, right? Like you'd be surprised, as students often are, what a conversation and an outreach can lead to and create opportunities. So.
Right. Thank you, Christy Bell.
Well, I'll underscore what Jennifer and Christy Bell said. Show students your humanity, even while you're a serious scholar. It's an interesting mix, but they're so excited to be in your classes. You have no idea. I was working with an honors student and helping to resolve a particular situation. And when I did outreach to the students' professors, one of them wrote back and said how amazing the student was, and that they, hoped everything would work out and blah, blah, blah. And I went back and I told the student, hey, by the way, like this particular professor thinks you're amazing and that you're one of the strongest people in the class. Now, you might say, like if I tell the student this, like that could also backfire because the student's struggling with something. Oh no, the student was like, really, Dean Williams? Really? And I mean, like eyes welling up, the whole thing, because they hadn't had that interplay.
Yeah.
And the student thinks that the professor's amazing. It's like, but it is about feeling seen. They were seeing each other, but looking past each other. And now they know that there's that thing there. And that there's a mutual respect thing there and a mutual admiration. So if at all possible, like in your communications with students, like, and you may already be doing this, tell them something positive about something they said in class, or as you're grading their voluminous papers, like I always try to do it, like, so I always tell folks to do it too when I used to grade papers a lot. Say something good in the paper, like say something good, always say something good. But also, know that if a student comes to me first and they're not sure how to approach a professor, I tell them to go with questions already written out, so that they don't feel like they have to generate questions. So I'll flip it around to you. Like if a student comes to see you, like ask them something specific about an assignment, or like, I saw that you really seemed to flourish in this last assignment. Like, what was it about it? What did you like about it? Or did you like this most recent reading? Like, did it really connect with the rest of the material? What do you think about that? You'll be surprised, they'll answer you because they want to engage so badly, and also to be seen.
Thank you so much, Tracy Ann.